That concludes questions for oral answer. The House comes to the debate on the Budget Policy Statement 2015.
I move that the House
David Bennett.
I move that the House take note of the report of the Finance and Expenditure Committee on the Budget Policy Statement 2015. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand lives in very exciting times. We have a government that has delivered the best economic results that are possible in this time. We have a government that has delivered economic growth at a very, very difficult point in our country's history, and it has delivered the ability for this country to grow even stronger in the future. This is a country which now experiences some of the best economic growth in the Western world. When we look at actual economic growth of 3.2% and forecast growth of 3.5% in the budget policy statement, we see an economy that is delivering for all New Zealanders. We see an economy that has got the fundamentals there for all New Zealanders to prosper and grow. The Consumer Price Index, for example, is at 1.5% in 2014 and forecast for 1.3% this year. Unemployment is now at 5.7%. That is forecast to go down to 4.5% in 2018. The current account deficit is now a percentage of GDP is only at 2.7% and is expected to go to minus 5.3% in 2015. Compare that to what we encountered when we came into office. Compare that to a country that was in recession before the rest of the Western world. Compare that to a country that had interest rates of around 11% for our household owners and our business owners. Compare that to a country that had a current account deficit at around 7.9%. This government has delivered the economic results New Zealanders have been looking for. It has delivered the economic results that set us up for the future going forward. Some of those results that growth rate of over 3% is better than the European area, the US, the UK, Japan and Canada. Interest rates are staying lower for longer, with mortgage interest rates at 50-year lows. Household disposable income is increasing faster than inflation, rising 9.9% in real terms over the last 4 years. Recent job growth is expected to continue. There are 80,000 more people employed now than there were a year ago, and 217,000 more than 5 years ago. Those unemployment rates are staggeringly low for New Zealand going forward at 4.5%, and a lot of that is driven out of the growth in Christchurch. And those economic results aren't by accident. They represent prudent economic management, and the budget policy statement is part of that prudent economic management. It shows a country that has strong economic management, that has an economic plan, that is following it and is delivering in that economic area. If we go and have a look at my local city of Hamilton, we can see that economic growth and we can see that economic change that's happening. Just this week, there has been a huge announcement in our city in regard to roading infrastructure, which has been important, an excellent announcement, which is important for the growth of that city going forward. There has been $972 million committed to the Hamilton bypass of the Waikato Expressway. That is part of a $1.08 billion project that has been just announced and supported this week in the funding. There's no by-election there. But I would remind members on the other side of the House that some of the other parties that may be contesting a by-election don't believe in the roads of national significance. And I'd like to see the members of the Northland community see what the New Zealand First Party actually said during the election campaign. During the election campaign, New Zealand First campaigned against the roads of national significance. Okay, that's a lie. This is what Tracy Martin says. That is a lie. Those are her words. Well, I'm going to read out the New Zealand First transport policy that came from Winston Peters on the Sunday the 13th of July at 2 p.m. in Gisborne. This here says, quote, We are calling for a thorough review of National's bloated and hugely expensive RONS program, which is massively extravagant given all the other areas of necessary spending that have been cut to fund it. Did you say that was a lie, Tracy? I don't believe so. It's amazing that Winston Peters now can support RONS in Auckland, but he can't do that during the election campaign. But it gets better when you look at the transport policy of New Zealand First, because they had a plan. They were going to take away the RONS, and the Puhoi Road, Puhoi to Wellsford, was one they were taking away. And I have been in election meeting after election meeting with the New Zealand First candidate, Dennis. He stood up and he said, we are taking away that road. And they were going to replace it. They had something to replace it with. And this is, the New Zealand First will develop a program of railways of national importance. The Ronnie. And okay, they brought Ron back, but they didn't get the Ronnie. And Winston is against the road from Wellsford to Puhoi. I have it in writing here. And I will table it for this country so that they can see that that is what the voters of Wellsford and North need to remember when they come to the election, because New Zealand First did not support that infrastructure that Northland needs. And when we come to the budget policy statement, we are looking at the growth of the New Zealand economy. We're looking at those fundamental economic bases that are there. And if you don't invest in that infrastructure, then there is not the ability to deliver that economic growth. And for all those voters in Northland, remember that we need that economic growth to happen, and that will come through the investment in infrastructure. And I can tell you from a voter in Hamilton that the Hamiltonians realise the importance of the roads of national significance. Because the Waikato Expressway is the defining difference between National and Labour. It's the defining difference between Hamilton growing and not growing. And the same applies in Northland. And remember the words of Tracy Martin, that was a lie, but then you look at the reality of what New Zealand First actually said during their campaign. And I'd like to see them revert on that. Mr. Speaker. So, we can't do that line, Tracy. You've tried it, okay? It didn't work. Try another one next time, okay? Okay. Today, the Treasury released the Crown accounts for the 7 months to January, which shows a part-year surplus of $77 million. That is the first time since 2009 that New Zealand has been in surplus. This is in the most difficult of economic conditions. We are in we have a situation where there have been decreasing commodity prices in the last year, where we have a very tenuous and delicate world economic situation, where we have a government that has maintained social spending and increased spending in health and education and the areas of priority that New Zealanders want to see an increase in expenditure, all the while being able to do that and delivering a small economic surplus this year, for the first part of this year. And that may be difficult to translate into a full economic surplus over the full year, but those are the economic conditions that we have to deal with. And that prudent economic management has been led by the Minister of Finance, the Honourable Bill English, and I'd like to pay credit for him and his leadership in making that happen, because this is an important part of the economic management of New Zealand. And in the budget policy statement, we set out 4 priorities that this government has followed: responsibly managing the government's finances, which I've talked about, and how that's leading to surplus in time to come, and we're already at a current surplus now. Building a more competitive and productive economy to create jobs, raise incomes and provide more opportunities. We see that in the infrastructure investments, the things like the Waikato Expressway and the Wellsford and Puhoi roads. Delivering better public services so that you can get better and more convenient health care. Beneficiaries are supported into work, and the streets of New Zealand are safer. Rebuilding Christchurch has been a crucial part of the New Zealand government's agenda for the last few years, and will continue to be so because it is our second biggest city and we need to rebuild that. Mr. Speaker, New Zealanders have much to risk from a change in economic policy, and that would be the last thing we need in this country. The economic policy that we have has worked and is working and is delivering the opportunities for all New Zealanders going forward. We do not need a country that has higher taxes, spends more on social welfare just for the sake of it, that limits immigration, that stops infrastructure growth, and that doesn't provide the economic base for New Zealanders to go forward. Mr. Speaker, National has delivered, and this budget policy statement is an example of that delivery. Thank you.
The question is, the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
Grant.
Thank you,
Robertson.
Mr. Speaker. It's quite difficult on this side of the House to take